backtracking episode proper for Kittie, and as always we begin with the debut album, in this case Kittie's debut, being titled Spit. Released in 2003 at NG/Artemis Records and produced by Garth Richardson, this album is a showcase of the band's unique sound right off the bat. They have this really murky style of nu metal that reminds me of old school Korn with thick guitar and bass tones and a lot of snare work too. And since I already covered what the band were doing up until this album came out, I can just roll right up with the intro title track of the album. It captures that nu metal aggression that I was on about just a little while earlier in this paragraph, and it's a sound that's carried through the rest of the album. However, I feel like I must note that there was a lineup shift. See, on the cover of this album, the Lander sisters and Fallon Bowman are present along with Talina Outfield. Tanya Candler was still recorded bass for the album, and she is credited, but so is Talina, who wasn't with the band during the recording, so that's just something weird I thought that I would share with you. Anyway, the album itself would get a mixed response, with many liking the sound but not the words. Me, I like the words, even if it seems a bit disingenuous for the band to sing about what they're singing about. The lyrics mostly cover bullying, sexuality and feminism, but the band have had pretty normal lives outside of all that. I myself am not a feminist, but this was 2000, before the concept of feminism was bastardised by the social justice wankers that we see today on Tumblr. But the lyrics do match the music, which I always appreciate, because aggressive subjects need the music to back them up. The album is well put together too. It's got a great pacing to it, it's produced with a raw feel, giving it some authenticity, and all in all it's just a solid debut that deserves more credit, and my favourite song goes to Brackish. All in all, Spit is an album title befitting of the nature of the album, and you can tell that the band were determined to make it count, and make it count they did indeed do. We then move on to the band's second album, Oracle. Released in 2001, it would come out solely through Artemis Records, and Garth Richardson would return to produce. So, after Spit came out, the band got to touring and whatnot, most notably the 2001 Snowcore tour, and after they were done with that, they returned to the same basement where they recorded their debut. Also, my cat's here, hi. It wouldn't be without its growing pains, however, as Fallon Bowman would lead the band and leave them as a trio for the time being, and there's also the fact that the band hadn't written new music in 4 years up until that point. In fact, much of what comprised Spit was stuff that they were sitting on for a long time, and that album was even finished about 5 months before it got released. Moving on, this album also starts with the title track, and from the get-go it's clear that this is a different side of Kittie already. Musically, they had more death metal stuff here, and they start breaking away from the Korn mold, which sounds disgusting now that I read that out loud actually. They start experimenting with heavier stuff here, and the band themselves said that they were coming into their own more on this album, and I honestly agree with that. What I don't agree with is that, again, critics were harsh on this one, even more so than they were on Spit. Now, I'll admit, I don't like this one as much as I like Spit, but I still enjoyed this album. It just feels a bit slower and repetitive in some places, but the new genres added do make up for that. The band was still young into their career, not even hitting the 20 by the time that this album came out, but the band still play their hearts out here, determined as hell to make this new stuff work, and it does for the most part, which is better than it not working at all, and my favourite song goes to Severed. While it's not without its blemishes, the band still put together a solid piece of nu metal, and the performances, experimentation and production boost that up considerably. Next is the band's third effort, Until the End. Released in 2004, it would be the band's last release for Artemis Records and their first and only album produced by Steve Thompson. This would also be their only album to have members Jennifer Arroyo and Lisa Marks on bass and guitar respectively. Now, I don't have a ton of background for this one, so I'll just tell the basics. For a brief period in 2002, after Fallon left, she was replaced by Jeff Phillips of the band Thy Noise Bleed, and Jennifer Arroyo would later replace Talina Outfield in that time too. But around the year of this album's release, Jeff focused on his band full-time, and Kittie brought in Lisa to replace him on the instrument that he was playing, and with that said, we move on to the first song, Look So Pretty. One of the things about an album like this coming out in the year that it did is that, well, album 3 is when changes start to take more form. Maybe it was because they got a different producer for this one, but a lot of what we get here sounds cleaner right from the starting track, and I'll be honest, even though this is Lisa and Jennifer's only album with the band, they actually sound pretty good here. It is a shame that this album is also when behind the scenes drama would occur, with the band and the label coming to a settlement, mostly due to Artemis being assholes and breaching the contract. How many times did they breach it, you may ask, or may not ask, I don't know. The answer? 11 times. Now, I don't know a lot about contract breaching, but I think that counts as excessive. Back to this album though, it's got a good pacing, with the instruments and vocals bouncing off of each other a lot better, and the lyrics focus on more personal issues like betrayal, abuse, death and sadness, things that the band may have had to actually deal with considering the circumstances. It's honestly just all tied up so well, and the band keeping it simple helps a lot too. My favourite song goes to In Dreams. Until the End wasn't an easy departure from Artemis, but the band made the most of it with their gutsy attitude and uncompromising sound. Moving right along now to the band's fourth output, Funeral for Yesterday. Released in 2007, it would be the band's first and only through their own label of XFM from Records, and it's their only album produced by Jack Ponte, and it's also the band's first with Tara McLeod and first and only album with Trish Doan. So uniquely, this is the first album where the band actually worked a bit harder to try and promote it. Sure, making their own record label helped, but the Lander sisters' appearances in metal documentaries and the start of their own Poison Black clothing line helped things along too, not to mention an EP in 2006 titled Never Again, and a DVD that was released alongside this CD. Now, 4 of this album's songs would be reworked from the aforementioned EP, but we kick off with another title track for this one. That seems to be a habit of theirs, as is their tendency to change things up for each album, and this album sounds a lot cleaner from the get-go, and I don't know if that's due to the producer or the band themselves. But honestly, I appreciate it. It allows Morgan to sing more properly, as well. I enjoy her screaming. Her singing has a chance to improve here, and she takes that chance and runs with it. The production also feels more balanced. There's just as much time given to the vocals as there is to the guitar work, and it's a more accessible sound, and the lyrics talking about love, sadness and anger show maturity too. Even if they do verge a bit mainstreamy, but I'm fine with that, personally. The core sound is still pretty fast-paced as well, having a different edge to its structure, but make no mistake, this is still definitely a Kittie record. The guitar work gallops beautifully across the album's length, Mercedes drumming helps things along too, and the new members more than do their part. I have little to nothing to complain about here, honestly, and my favourite song goes to Everything That Could Have Been. Funeral for Yesterday is the best parts of Kittie's sound taken to a new level, and the newer styles blend in damn near seamlessly thanks to the top-notch production, which is just good shit. Next up is Kittie's fifth album, In the Black. This would be released in 2009 via E1 Music and produced by Siegfried Meyer, and it would be the band's first album with bassist Ivana Ivy Vujic. This is also, bizarrely, Kittie's only album with a guest star, as Justin Wolf of the band Acacia appears on the closing track, The Truth. So after all of the promotion for Funeral for Yesterday, the band would tour it off by joining bands such as 36 Crazy Fists and In This Moment, and the band got to work on this album shortly after. But in 2008, Trish Down left the band to battle her anorexia, which led to Ivy replacing her, and the badness wouldn't stop there sadly, as the band's manager and the Lander sisters' father David would pass away from a heart attack, so yeah. That aside, let's try to move on with the instrumental track Kingdom Come, then the first song proper in My Plague. And it's a stark contrast to their previous album in that the sound on this one seems to go back to the earlier, much heavier work. But it's taken with a more measured and mature approach, and that could either be due to the production or just the band themselves, or maybe both. And I don't like bringing this up, but it's clear that what the band went through up until this point vindicated the lyrics a bit more than most of their older work did. That kind of pain and pressure can often be turned into something good, and this album is a really good example of that. It's an improvement musically, with different types of riffs, more solos, and great work from the low end and from behind the kit too. And lyrically it focuses on that pain and that anger and that sadness that the band had, and they weren't afraid to let it all out here. It's another well-structured album. It shows the band tapping even more into the potential that they displayed on Funeral for Yesterday, and my favourite song goes to Now or Never. With some of their best guitar work, solid production and great performances from, well, just about everyone, In the Black is another great showcase for the band. And finally, for this episode, we reached the band's sixth and last album so far, I Failed You. Released in 2011, it would come out through the same label, be produced by the same person, and had the same lineup, although Ivy Vujic would get married in the time between, so she's now Ivy Jenkins, which is lovely. So yeah, after In the Black was released, the band got busy with touring in Europe, then they did some more touring in North America, and then even more touring for the Happy Days tour headlined by Insane Clown Posse of all people. Then would come the Thrash and Burn tour, and Mercedes Lander would form the Alcoholics with former bassist Tanya Candler. Basically, Kittie were busy as balls in 2010. Still, they managed to put out this album, which starts with another title track. It sort of feels like listening to a modernised version of their debut, with how heavy it can get in places, but there's more of a grungy swagger to it, which I quite like. I also feel like that connection to their debut is more apropos, as this album also got a mixed response like their debut did. Honestly, I feel like Kittie has just come so far on their own by this point that, while I don't think that they would care much for what the critics say, and if this is truly to be their last album, it's far from the worst note to go out on. I mean, sure, the band would do other things after this album, touring, joining new bands and putting out a documentary, but as this album goes, I'd say that Kittie has done their time, personally. It's still musically heavy, it's still instrumentally sludgy, it's still lyrically dark, and a bit off in the production front, but not enough to be a deal breaker. I Failed You might not have lit up the critics, but it sure didn't disappoint me, and my favourite song goes to Never Come Home. I Failed You is a pretty sound note to go out on, and I know that it sounds mean, but I'd be fine if the band just enjoyed not continuing Kittie. In my mind, they've contributed enough, and they've earned their time away for however long that may last. Rest in peace, Trish Down. So, that is about it for the Kittie episode. Certainly a unique one, but no less fun to go over their old material and pick out what I liked, which was surprisingly a majority of it, and, you know, for any fans of the band who might be watching this, I'm sorry if I was a bit too harsh on an album you might have liked. I think that's the first time I've ever said that for Backtracking, you know, like, this is the 5th season, I've been doing this for technically 5 years? I don't know. Next time I won't be going to the UK next time as I actually live here, but I'll be covering Manchester, England's own Sonic Boom 6, and as always, thank you for watching, you're awesome. Bye bye.